Dispatch, already in pursuit.
This is Brian, screenfiles.com and review. And what I'm looking at today is 2025's Tron Ares, directed by Joachim Ronny. When I heard that this movie was being produced, it confused me a bit. If only because the Tron movies, which for the most part I enjoy, are very much niche film. They've never been very well received by people. That's not to say that they've done terribly, though to be fair they haven't done that well either. It's fairly apparent that there are not enough people out there who are willing to pay to see these movies in theaters. In any case, having recently seen Tron Ares, I think I understand what Disney was trying to do with it. They're trying to expand its audience, but while doing that, I get the feeling that they're alienating that core audience, the people who are most loyal to the franchise. By which I mean, Tron Ares doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean that from a writing perspective. And I think it alienates the core viewer, the people who really like this franchise, by doing things that don't make sense in the context of that franchise. For instance, the movie is called Tron Ares. Now, keep in mind something. There is a character called Tron. We met him in the first movie. We met him again in Tron Legacy. Though in that movie he was known as Rensler. There's no Tron in Tron Ares. Tron has become more of a brand than anything else in this third movie at any rate. And that's not great, because it tells me that, as I mentioned already, they have priorities beyond building this world. They, by my estimation, want more people to get into it. So there's that. Then there's a really odd thing about this movie. Namely, the people who wrote it don't seem to understand it. For instance, if you recall Tron, and to a lesser extent Tron Legacy, light cycles created light walls behind them. The whole point of this was, on the game grid, they were designed to make other vehicles, other light cycles, crash into them. That's the point of the light wall. That's it. Tron Legacy expanded this idea with airplane-type vehicles, which had light walls behind them. Once again, with the idea that vehicles would crash into them. That's the whole point of light walls. So in Tron Ares, you have vehicles wrapping light walls around an entire city. For what? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to cut off this city from somewhere else? There's no indication that that's the case, but it doesn't make any sense. There's another scene where Athena uses drones to create light walls to trap a person. This is an interesting use of light walls, but it's something that hasn't been done prior, which doesn't make it bad. It just makes it strange, because if it were something that they were capable of doing, I suspect they would have done it already, somewhere in the prior two films. Never mind that light walls in the first Tron and in Tron Legacy were only able to be created on the game grid. You just couldn't create them anywhere. While they emanated from the light cycle, they still needed to be on the game grid for that to happen. They couldn't just create them wherever they were. So it changes this bit of the mechanics behind the movie. And again, to what avail? Why are they making these changes? It was just odd. As someone who is a genuine fan of the first Tron film and has grown to appreciate Tron Legacy even more, it confused me. I didn't understand why things were happening. Continue more in that vein. Jared Leto's Ares is supposedly the master control program of that grid. That doesn't make any sense. Because if you recall the first Tron, Sark was the MCP's enforcer. He was not the master control. The master control program controlled everything on the grid. And more importantly, controlled who was able to get out and who was able to get in. He controlled communication between the grid and the real world. So the idea that Ares is supposedly the master control program makes no sense. It's also worth mentioning because he's not. He does nothing that a security/infiltration program like Tron didn't do. He is not the MCP. This tells me that the writers of Tron Ares don't understand the movie that they're producing. And this bothers me because all you need to do is actually watch it. So it's really strange. And there's been a lot of people complaining about Jared Leto's performance as Ares. It's not terrible. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. And to be totally honest, I don't really care. To me, Jared Leto has always had a very culty vibe. Kind of like the dude from the Flash movie. His name's eluding me right now. But he doesn't come off quite that weird, at least openly so. So, while I had wished that he was not involved with the movie, I didn't really care all that much. He was fine. His performance was fine. It was nothing to write home about by any means, but it was okay. Not a big deal. As I mentioned before, the Tron movies have never been particularly profitable. Now, they may make money though. They may make money based on, well, I was about to say DVD sales, but I'm not sure who's buying many DVDs these days. On streaming, they may make money because of ancillary things like theme park rides, toys, merchandising, stuff like that. They may make money at the end of the day. But the point being, the movies themselves are profitable. I think the one that came closest to being profitable was probably Tron Legacy. But it just begs the question, why are they spending $180 million on a niche movie? Keep it niche. Stop spending so much money on them. Give them a chance to build audience. But apparently, by my reckoning, Disney is forcing this issue. They want these movies to be big. They want them to be successes. And they're not going to be by treating them this way. They deserve a more patient hand. They deserve smaller budgets. They deserve innovation in terms of how they're put together. Greatly improved by someone like a Guillermo del Toro, which is to say someone who knows how to spend relatively small amounts of money for maximum effect. I'm thinking of del Toro for these movies, not necessarily because of his love for monsters and so on, because if that's the case, Tron doesn't really fit. But, as I said, Guillermo del Toro knows how to spend relatively small amounts of money to have great looking movies. If you recall Hellboy: The Golden Army, that cost, if I recall, $120 million to produce. This is something Disney doesn't seem to understand. They keep throwing good money after bad in making these films. For me, what was most interesting about Tron were the ideas and particularly the visuals that it got across. It is just a remarkable looking movie. It's interesting, and in fact, it reminds me of a black and white film. It's just something that was so visually startling. It was incredible to me at the time. And when you combine it with the music of Wendy Carlos, it's just an experience. Typically for me, music in movies is something that is added after the fact. And it feels like that. That's not to say it's bad. That's not to say it's good. That's simply to say it's something that was added after the fact. In terms of Tron, the music felt like a part of the movie. I couldn't, in my mind, divorce the music from the movie. Tron Legacy, somewhat lesser so. I don't think the music was as well integrated as it was in the first film, but you could see that the people who did it, Daft Punk in this instance, tried. It was in many ways very similar to what Wendy Carlos did with the first film. Now with Tron Ares, Nine Inch Nails is doing the music, and it's fine. It's not great. It never really feels like the music and the film are one, like in the case of what Wendy Carlos did, but it's fine. Though what's curious to me is that Joachim Running in an interview said that he was going for a more industrial sound with Nine Inch Nails. And I would argue that the music is not very industrial. It's, once again, it's not bad, but it doesn't bring the quantum leap that Running implied. It's fine. The story of Tron Ares revolves around a race between Incom and Dillinger Systems. Dillinger Systems is headed by Julian Dillinger, the grandson, if I recall, of Ed Dillinger from the first Tron, played by David Warner. Why Cillian Murphy wasn't playing this role, which he did play in Tron Legacy, really bugs me. Cillian Murphy would have been excellent. He brings a sort of presence that would have worked really well for this role. But, as I said, we have Evan Peters, who's fine in the role. And his company, as well as Incom, have the ability to create computer-generated beings and things outside the internet, in our world. But it only lasts for 29 minutes. This is because it lacks permanence. And in that regard, they're looking for something called the permanence code. Where this came from? No idea. It certainly isn't present in the first movies. But this permanence code will allow computer-generated beings and things, like vehicles and so on and so forth, to exist in our world. Now, the problem with this is that I don't understand how that would affect a vehicle. Do you just add the code to the vehicle? It seems plausible to me. So that would enable these things, people and vehicles, to exist in our world. And so Dillinger Systems and Incom are racing to discover this permanence code. It is very clear that Julian Dillinger is the villain of this film. And it's so blatantly obvious that he's the villain of this film. There's nothing approaching nuance about him at all. Never mind, he is related to Ed Dillinger, the villain from the first movie. But he spends his time retrieving soldiers and weapons from the grid, while the surviving Kim sister at Incom is making fruit trees. Oh yes, and a question about this digitization process and this permanence code. It's very strange in the sense that the Kim sister had created a fruit tree with code. Now, she did this in a seemingly Arctic environment, which begs the question, is this a real tree? Because last time I checked, orange trees don't do well in the Arctic, and they freeze. So even if you did create this, why is it not frozen? So it doesn't make any sense. In any case, so there's this race to find a permanence code. Julian Dillinger wants it so that the things he brings from the grid will last forever and he can sell them to the military and so on and so forth. The movie is fairly inert. It's not to say I don't think it's boring, though a lot of people do say that Tron films are boring. I thought Legacy had some fairly boring moments to it. And that's probably because it tried to copy certain beats from the first Tron, not successfully in my opinion. Though I wouldn't say that Tron Ares is boring. As I said, I think it's fairly inert. It's just kind of there. It doesn't feel like it's really doing anything interesting. So that's kind of a pity. For me, the movie takes on a bit of life when Ares is sucked back into the computer, into Dillinger's grid, the original grid from Tron and Tron Legacy. And we're seeing him in that environment. That's interesting. What isn't for me is that Jeff Bridges' Flynn turns up. Some pseudo-religious malarkey. I'm not even sure it makes any sense, but he imbues Ares with the permanence code, and Ares, his physical appearance changes somewhat. As I said, it comes off pseudo-religious, and it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. But in any case, Ares has the permanence code, and so he can live in the outside world without breaking down after 29 minutes. But he can die. He can't be brought back, which is kind of interesting, I gotta admit. That's an interesting thing there. And so Ares is now fighting Athena, who Julian Dillinger made the master control, which once again makes no sense. And she decides to create a really big recognizer. I think recognizers are already pretty big, and uses it to try to kill the Kim sisters. She's trying to follow Dillinger's orders to the nth degree. Kind of like Clue did, in fact, in Tron Legacy. So it's kind of a little callback to that film, and I appreciated that. Stay to the end, by the way. There's a stinger, as Marvel films call it, which doesn't make sense to me, in that Julian Dillinger, to escape the police, is taken to the grid, and he becomes Sark. Okay, what are you saying? What is the point of this? Apparently there is a trace of the MCP in the old grid. Once again, so what? I'm not sure what they're trying to say with this, beyond the fact that apparently they're going to bring back Garrett Hedlund's character, Cora, played by Olivia Wilde, I believe, in a sequel, which will probably happen, by the way, because once again, none of these movies have been particularly profitable, yet they always seem to beget very expensive sequels. So I expect there will be, somewhere down the line, a sequel to Tron Ares. I just don't know what the point of it is. It's good looking, the music is fine, but it just doesn't seem to work. Now, as I mentioned at the top, there is a way to do this. Make it weird. The first film was weird as fuck, at least visually. Make it niche. Stop trying to appeal to everyone, because when you try to appeal to everyone, you end up appealing to very few people. So stop doing it. Cut the budgets. Make them for less money. Tron Ares spent a lot of time in the real world. Why is this movie so expensive? Cut the budget. Bring it in for, let's say, $100 million, which is not cheap, but it would force the filmmakers to innovate. They would have to compensate for that lack of production money with some genuinely interesting ideas and visuals. That can save Tron. That can make Tron more than it currently is. Sure, I don't think it's ever not going to be niche, but it can be successful. Niche movies appeal to a relatively small group of people, but that's fine. You can find profit in that. Just let it happen. Stop trying to make Tron something like an Avengers movie or whatever, because it's not. So what do you think? This is Brian at screenfiles.com and review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like, follow, or buy me a call.